So we're going to be in Luke chapter 7 again. I know it's a long time in Luke chapter 7, but it's a long chapter and it's got good stories. And we've been studying Jesus' life now. It's contained in the Gospels for over a year, trying to work our way chronologically through the things that Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John have recorded for us in the first four books of the New Testament. All told, really, the public life and ministry of Jesus of Nazareth was pretty brief, historically speaking, really. It was less than 3 years of human history in total. And it begins when Jesus steps out of obscurity into the public eye in the year 27. That's the year we know this as. And that's when Jesus leaves his home in Galilee and heads south to Jerusalem to attend the Passover. This is when Jesus announces himself for the first time publicly to his people. And it's during the Passover that year Jesus begins to preach to the people, calling them to repent of their sin, to turn their wayward hearts back to their God and receive his forgiveness. Prepare themselves for the arrival of his kingdom. And Jesus, accompanies his words with demonstrations. His words aren't empty. He has power and authority to announce the things that he's announcing. And he shows the people that he really is sent by God by doing things only God can do. He's been healing people from every kind of disease. No matter what's wrong with someone, Jesus can make it right, and he does. The blind, the deaf, the lame, the deformed, the epileptics, the leprous, even people tormented by demons, Jesus heals them all. And we worked our way through the story now to the point where Jesus has been traveling around preaching that message of repentance and salvation to his people, and healing people and driving out demons for about 6 months now, maybe a little longer. We're about half a year or so into the 3-year story of Jesus' public life by this point. He's living in Galilee, a province of the Roman Empire to the north of Judea and Samaria. And he's traveling all over Galilee, teaching in the synagogues and preaching to the people. In the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at a story in which Jesus, prompted by the visit of some of the disciples of John the Baptist, Jesus has some things to say about the hard hearts of his people. Basically, he rebukes his people for their rejection of John and for their rejection of him, and he warns them all of the judgment that's going to come on them for their rejection of God's last prophet and their rejection of himself, God's promised Messiah. That's where we are, and as we talked about last week, Jesus knows that not all of his people are going to reject him. He has his true believers. He has 12 disciples, his chosen ones. He's got a core group of about 70 that believe in him. We're going to hear about them later. And he's got a larger crowd of followers, among whom are future believers. Anyway, when Jesus is leveling all these rebukes on his people, he's not condemning everyone. He's talking about the people at large. The nation as a whole entity. This generation, he calls them in Luke 7:31 there. See, Jesus knows that even though some will believe in him, by and large, his people will mostly reject him. And they'll pay a heavy price for that rejection. Jesus knows that one day, about 40 years after this story today, God is once again going to drive his wayward people from the land. And he's going to destroy Jerusalem again. And the temple of God will be torn down again. And this time not for rejecting the prophets of God, but this time for rejecting the Son of God, the promised Messiah. And we've seen the stories that we've covered so far in Jesus, his interactions with the leadership of his people, the powers that be in Jerusalem, the elders and the priests and the Sanhedrin, the ruling council. Jesus' main rivals as well, the Pharisees and their scribes and lawyers. Those guys, they don't like what Jesus is doing at all. They don't like what he's saying. They don't like his popularity with the people, and they've already decided that they want him dead. 6 months in, and he's got to go. And they decided that months ago, actually. Remember when they were all upset about him doing miracles on the Sabbath? We had several stories about that. And Jesus made a point of defying their made-up Sabbath laws by healing a man with a withered hand in the synagogue, right in front of the Pharisees on the Sabbath. And Mark tells us in Mark 3:6, the Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. And today we're going to look at a story that only Luke records, actually. A story that exemplifies perfectly the heart of the issue for those who are choosing to reject Jesus. We'll start in Luke chapter 7, verse 36. You can follow along. One of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and wiped them with the hair of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with the ointment. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. And Jesus answering said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he answered, say it, teacher. A certain money lender had 2 debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now which of them will love him more? Simon answered, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And he said to him, you have judged rightly. Then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she loved much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. And then those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? And he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Okay, let's go back and unpack this story just a little bit and see what we can learn. Back to verse 36. One of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him. And he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. Obviously, we're talking about Jesus here, who has been asked by the Pharisee, and Jesus goes. Jesus gets an invitation for dinner from a Pharisee, and he accepts. And I know we talked a lot, and we do talk a lot, about the animosity that's being built up between Jesus and the Pharisees. The feelings between them are mutually at odds, let's just say. For the most part, the Pharisees don't like the things that Jesus is saying and doing. And likewise, Jesus doesn't like what the Pharisees are saying and doing either. By and large, they're just opposed to each other. But still, Jesus never writes anyone off as lost, as beyond his help, or not worthy of his message at least, even a Pharisee. This actually happens at least a couple of times in the Gospels. Jesus accepting invites for dinner at a Pharisee's house. Of course, Jesus is willing to go. Jesus has come to call and save any and all who will believe in him, even the Pharisees. I hope so, actually, thinking about it. Who among us hasn't acted a little Pharisaical sometimes? Who hasn't sometimes been a little overconfident in our own opinions sometimes? Or maybe a little less than humble in our assessments of the shortcomings of others? If Jesus didn't come to save us from the sin of self-righteousness too, how many of us would make it into the kingdom? Anyway, this Pharisee, Simon is his name, extends to Jesus an invitation to his house for a meal, and Jesus accepts. Verse 36, Jesus went into the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair of her head, and kissed his feet and anointed them with ointment. Okay, well, that's awkward. I mean, I've been to lots of dinner parties, even hosted a few. Never had anything like this happen. Never seen a woman show up and wash someone else's feet with their tears and then dry those feet with their hair and then pour perfume on them. It's ointment and perfume are the same thing. What's going on here? A couple of things to help explain the scene. The first thing is this. This invitation to Jesus from the Pharisee to come and eat at his house, it would not be a private affair. Okay? This is an invite to Jesus to attend a social event at the home of Simon the Pharisee. And we think, sometimes when we think of dinner invitations, we think of a few people sitting around the dining room table. It's an exclusive, it's a private occasion. That's not how to envision what's happening here, okay? Think of it more like an open house event, like a drop-in, like the thing that Rob and Kim had last week at Grog's. Maybe like a wedding actually would be even better. See, the wedding, right, is usually itself fairly open. The wedding ceremony, anybody can generally go in who wants to come and watch and listen. But the reception, the dinner that accompanies the wedding, though, it's only for the invited guests. So a similar thing is going on right here, except both are happening at the same time. Simon the Pharisee is hosting an event, and he would be he'd be a pretty big deal in town. The Pharisees were on the top of the social hierarchy, after all. And so when Simon held an event, the word would get around. Because this type of event, a dinner party, would be a drop-in type of event. There would be an invited guest list for sure, but other non-invited guests would be allowed in to observe and listen to the conversation, because that's what the invitation really is about. Simon is going to gather a few people together to have a meal and to talk, and the doors will be open for anyone who wants to come and watch and listen in on the conversation. As Simon, he would be a man of means, fairly well off, relatively speaking. He probably has one of the larger homes in the city, and this dinner party is probably happening in some kind of courtyard, maybe. Maybe it has a covering, maybe not. Not necessarily indoors is what I'm saying. Lots of homes, the larger homes had courtyards in the middle of them. Regardless, the dining tables and the guests would be in the center, and there would be plenty of room for people to hang around the edges and listen to what's being discussed. Verse 36, Luke says Jesus reclined at the table. So Jesus, being an invited guest, gets a spot at the table. Notice it doesn't say he sits at the table. That's because at this time and place in history, at an event such as this, people didn't sit on chairs or benches to enjoy the meal. There would be a series of like mats or cushions or kind of low couches. Maybe like picture kind of like a low chaise lounge or something like that. Picture those kinds of things arranged around a large, long table. And all the guests at the table would recline on these cushions, and their heads would be near the table, and their feet would be out away from the table. And they would prop themselves up with an arm, free to reach the food and drink on the table. So that's the scene. Simon the Pharisee has invited Jesus to be a guest at the table for his dinner party. And Jesus is reclining at the table, eating and talking with the other invited guests, townspeople hanging around the edges of the gathering, listening in and watching. Verse 37, and behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner. Okay, behold. That's a word of emphasis. It's used to mark something as noteworthy or surprising. Behold, kind of like, this is remarkable, or look what happens, you'll never believe it. A woman of the city. Luke is just pointing out that this is not a mystery woman. Right? She lives there in Capernaum. She's a resident. The people there at Simon's house know who she is. And what do the people of the city know about this woman of the city? Verse 37, she's a sinner. That's what they know. Okay, so Luke doesn't spell this out explicitly, but there is basically one main way that a woman could gain the reputation of sinner in the community. She's been involved in some kind of known sexual immorality, most likely. Most likely this woman has been guilty of adultery in some way. Or she's been a prostitute. And the whole town knows it. Regardless of the reason, this woman has been labeled a sinner because of what she has done. She is now basically an outcast, a second-class person in the Jewish society, on the level of like tax collector or Roman collaborator or a criminal. Probably shunned and ignored wherever she went by most of society. No self-respecting Jew would want to be associated with her and her defilement, whatever the cause of it. Verse 37, and behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner, when she learned that he was reclining at table in the Pharisee's house. So this woman, who everybody knows, and who everyone knows is a sinner, she hears about this dinner party that Simon the Pharisee is holding. And she hears that Jesus is one of the guests that have been invited. And she decides that she's going to head over to Simon's house. Verse 37, and when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster flask of ointment. So this woman's going to bring something with her to Simon's house. An alabaster flask of ointment. That word also, like I said, means perfume. They're one and the same at this time. Flasks of ointment or perfume are actually very common at this time. Archaeologists have found hundreds and hundreds of them in their digs dating from this time. Most people, especially when out for a social occasion, would have something that smelled nice on them. No antiperspirant back then, let's just say, or deodorant. So they would have something that smelled nice, especially when they went out for a special occasion. They'd have something nice on them, and they would often rub pleasant smelling oil on themselves when going out. And often, women especially, would have a little flask of perfume on a strap around their necks, ready to use should they need to spruce up a little on the spot. So this woman, when she hears that Jesus is at Simon's dinner party, grabs a flask of perfume and heads over. Verse 38, and standing behind him at his feet. Okay, so she gets to this event, probably trying to keep a low profile because of her reputation. People would probably mostly try to ignore her, avoid getting close to her or making eye contact with her. There'd be a lot of, what's she doing here? Murmurings among the people who, like her, were there to watch and to listen. Anyway, sometime after she's arrived, she makes her way around the room and around the table to the place where near Jesus is. She makes her way around until she's standing at the end of the couch or the cushion or whatever that Jesus is reclining on. Standing, as we're going to see, right over Jesus' feet. Verse 38, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping. Okay, this isn't getting a little teary. This is a word for crying, often connected with mourning and wailing. This is tears running down her face and dripping off. Verse 38, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Okay, her tears are so plentiful, and she is standing so close to Jesus that her tears begin to fall on his feet. And so, verse 38, she wiped them with the hair of her head. Okay, this is actually a pretty big deal. For a woman to let her hair down in public this way would be very unusual, to say the least. It would have been seen as disgraceful for a woman to do this in public. The only time, really, though, that such an act would be acceptable is, any guesses? When was it okay for a woman to weep and let her hair down in public? When they were mourning, then they're allowed to do that. So do you get the picture here? This woman is in grief. She's displaying grief and mourning by her actions. This woman's tears falling on Jesus' feet, so she stoops down and begins to dry his feet off with her hair. Back to verse 38. She wiped them with the hair of her head and kissed his feet and anointed them with the ointment. So she washes and dries Jesus' feet with her tears and her hair, and then she kisses his feet and then applies her ointment, her perfume, to Jesus' newly washed feet. Get the picture? And everyone would be watching her as she did this. I'm sure everyone there looking around like, are you seeing this? What is going on here? What does this woman think she's doing? I wonder what Simon thinks about this. It's his house, after all. It's his party. What was Simon thinking as he's watching this woman weep over Jesus and anoint his feet with perfume? Well, actually, we don't have to wonder. Verse 39. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. What's Simon thinking as he's watching this woman who is a known sinner wash and anoint Jesus' feet? Well, I can't believe that Jesus is letting this unclean woman touch him. One thing. Remember, Simon is a Pharisee. And as a Pharisee, Simon would be greatly concerned with his own personal purity. No Pharisee would ever be caught dead talking to a woman with such a tarnished reputation, let alone allowing her to touch him. And here's Jesus just letting this woman fawn all over his feet. So what does Simon conclude then about Jesus because of his lack of objection to the touch of this woman? He concludes that Jesus must not know how sinful this woman is. Because in Simon's mind, if Jesus knew just how bad this woman was, there'd be no way he'd be letting her do this. And then Simon reasons, if Jesus doesn't know who this woman really is, then he really can't be a prophet of God. Because any true prophet of God would know the sinfulness of this woman and would not let her be touching him like this. Simon takes in the scene and says to himself, that's all I need to see. Obviously, this Jesus guy is no prophet of God. He doesn't even know who's touching him. Question, does Jesus know who's touching him? And does he know the sinfulness of this woman of the city? Well, like many other times in the gospel, as unexpected as these things are to us or to Simon, and probably everybody else who is not surprised at all with what is happening here in this story. As is always the scene, Jesus is not surprised about any of this. He always knows what's going on. He knows what everyone is thinking. He knows why he is here, and he knows why this woman is here. And he knows the thoughts that are going through Simon the Pharisee's mind as he sees all this unfolding in front of him at his dinner party that evening. And now Jesus is going to speak up about Simon's unspoken thoughts. Verse 39, Simon is watching all this and thinking, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. Verse 40, and Jesus answering said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he answered, say it, teacher. So as the guests around the table are looking on at the unusual happenings, and Simon sits there thinking, man, this Jesus guy is a fraud. He's no prophet. Jesus speaks up and says, hey, Simon, got a question for you. Simon's like, okay, teacher. Add your sarcastic tone there. Okay, let's hear your question. Lay it on me. Verse 41, a certain moneylender had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. Jesus introduces his question for Simon by telling him a short story, a little parable. There are two men who owe money to a moneylender. Jesus says one owes the moneylender 500 denarii and the other owes him 50 denarii. A denarii is about a day's wages at the time. The point, though, isn't the amount of the denarii, the amount of the debt. The point is that one man owes 10 times what the other one owes. There's a man who owes a substantial amount of money, like 2 months' salary, but the other guy, he owes 10 times as much as the first guy. Verse 42. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Okay, in Jesus' story of the two debtors, it turns out neither one of them are able to pay back what they owe to the moneylender. And for whatever reason, this moneylender decides to let both of these guys off the hook. He cancels their debts. He decides and declares that neither one owes anything to him anymore. Verse 42. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now comes Jesus' question to Simon. Jesus asks him, now which of them will love the moneylender more? It's almost a rhetorical question, right? Everyone would know the answer. What's the answer? Of course, the one that owed 10 times more. Verse 43, Simon answered, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And he said to him, you have judged rightly. Simon gives the obvious answer, maybe imagine with an eye roll of some kind, like he's humoring Jesus in front of everybody. And despite Simon's attitude, Jesus is like, that's right. The one who owes more is going to love more, to appreciate the debt forgiveness more than the one who owed less. Verse 44, then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? So after he tells Simon this little parable and then asks Simon his first question, Jesus turns around on his couch and looks behind him at the woman standing or crouching there crying over him. And Jesus asks Simon another question, do you see this woman? Now think about it. Does Jesus really want to know whether or not Simon can see this woman? No, that's not the point of the question, is it? Of course Simon can see the woman. Everybody's been watching this woman. Simon has been sitting there looking at what this woman is doing, looking at her with disdain and arrogance and contempt for her and her actions. And Jesus knows it, and he's like, Simon, I know what you think of this woman and her actions. Let me tell you what I think about her and her actions. Verse 44, then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house, you gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Jesus says, do you see this woman? And points out three things that Simon did not do when Jesus arrived at his house. Simon did not offer Jesus any water to wash his feet. He did not greet Jesus with a kiss, and he did not anoint his head with oil. Here's the thing. None of those things are rules. Simon wasn't breaking the law by not giving Jesus water for his feet and a kiss and oil for his head. He's not breaking the law by not doing things, but he is making a statement. All three of these things were things you would do in their culture to make guests feel welcome in your house. Makes sense, right? We do similar things today. Think about it. When you invite someone over for dinner and they arrive at your house, what do? You greet them at the door. You give them a hug or a handshake. You say something like, welcome, come on in, so glad you could come. You offer to take their coats. You invite them to come in, to sit down. You offer them a drink. You have some snacks ready for them. You want your guests to feel welcome and wanted, right? When you're at home, you do the things to communicate to them that fact when they arrive at the door. Now think about it. You arrive at someone's house as invited, and when you arrive, your hosts do none of those things. No welcome, no come in, sit down, no hug, no can I take your coat, no offering of a drink or food. How welcome would you feel in such a situation? Not very. And that's what Jesus is saying to Simon. Simon, you did nothing to make me feel welcome at your table. Nothing to show that you really wanted me here with you. You didn't greet me with a kiss, a normal thing to do to show honor to your guests in their culture. You didn't give me water to wash my feet, a common practice of cleanliness in their day. And you didn't give me any oil for my head, again, a common practice. When you arrived at someone's house for a meal, you washed your feet. Washed off the dust and dirt of the road. You put on a little oil, a little ointment, a little perfume to make your smell a little bit nicer. And Jesus is like, Simon, you didn't do any of those things when I arrived. Now, Simon, look at this woman. This woman who you think is beneath you. This woman whom you look on with scorn and contempt. This woman who everyone knows is a sinner. Look at how she's treated me. She's washed my feet with her own tears. She's dried my feet with her own hair. She's greeted me with many kisses. She has anointed me with oil. The message would be clear to everyone. Jesus is saying, Simon, this woman known for her sinfulness has treated me way better than you, a Pharisee known for his righteousness. Verse 47. Therefore, I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. Question. If you had to choose in your life to be one or to be like one or the other of these two people, Simon the Pharisee or this woman, who would you choose to be? A person of impeccable reputation, highly esteemed by man, living a life separated from and above the sinners. Or a person of shameful reputation, scoffed at by man, living a life of derision, feeling shame and sorrow and regret every day. Well, here's something to think about. Who goes home forgiven? In which one of these people does Jesus find the heart that he's looking for? Can I point out that it's not what's on the outside that tells the truth? All right, it's what's on the inside. And this woman knows her great need for forgiveness. She literally falls weeping at his feet in mourning. She knows she owes him more than she can ever pay. And she knows she's found the one who can free her from her debt of sin. And Simon looks like he doesn't have the same need as this woman. That he doesn't think he needs forgiveness like this sinful woman needs forgiveness. And that's the difference. The one who receives the forgiveness of God in this story is the one who knows that they desperately need it. And the one who doesn't receive the forgiveness of God is one who is oblivious to his great need for it. The righteous Pharisee rejects his Savior, and this sinful woman falls at his feet forgiven. Verse 48, and he said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The story doesn't end there. Verse 49, then those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Think about the context of this now. Remember what made John the Baptist send his disciples to Jesus. After 6 months of traveling in Galilee and preaching and healing, the reputation of Jesus and the stories about him are flowing far and wide. The people are talking about Jesus, and the word on the street is this, that Jesus is a great prophet. And when John hears these rumors, he sends his disciples to ask Jesus if what the people believe about him is true or not. Is Jesus a prophet like the people are saying? Jesus, of course, answers no. I'm not a prophet of God. I am the Messiah of God. And the people were already not understanding who Jesus was. They're calling him a prophet. And fast forward to the dinner party and the actions of the woman at Jesus' feet. And what's Simon the Pharisee thinking as he's watching all of this unfold? Simon's thinking, these people are saying this guy's a prophet? Simon has made his assessment based on what he sees Jesus doing with this woman. Simon's come to his own belief. This guy, Jesus, he's no prophet. You see what Jesus' answer to Simon is? It's, Simon, you're right. I am no mere prophet. I am much more than a prophet. I can do something that no prophet of God, however powerful or inspired they may have been, I can do something they could never do. I can pronounce my people forgiven. That's what I can do that no prophet could do. That's what Jesus can do. He can declare the forgiveness of God. He personally can pronounce God's forgiveness on anyone he wants to. Forgiveness is God's alone to give, and everyone knew that, and it's true. So how can it be true that Jesus has the authority to do this? How can he tell this woman that she has the forgiveness that only God can give? Why does he have that kind of authority? Well, because he has won it. He has earned it. He has paid for it. That is, he's about to. Why can Jesus tell this woman she is forgiven? Go back in the story of the moneylender and the debtors for a sec here. When the moneylender cancels the debt of these two guys, does that deficit of money somehow just disappear? No. Someone has to cover it. Someone has to pay. The money is still gone until someone pays it back. Reality is, both this woman and Simon owe a debt they cannot pay. They're both guilty of sin and will one day stand, like all of us, before the throne of God to be judged. Why can Jesus tell this woman she will be forgiven for her debt on that day? Because he's going to personally pay her debt for her. Verse 50, and he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Why did Jesus say this? He hasn't said anything about her faith before now. In what way has this woman's faith saved her? It's this. Jesus isn't talking about the amount of this woman's faith. He's talking about the object of her faith. He's not saying that her faith has been powerful enough to save her. He's saying that the object that she has placed her faith in is powerful enough to save her. Her faith has saved her because she has placed her faith in him. Unlike Simon the Pharisee, who has placed his faith in his own righteousness, this woman, this known sinner, she has chosen to place her faith in Jesus. And he tells her, you can go in peace. You have chosen well. You are forgiven. I'll take care of it. And Jesus won't let her down. Jesus can pronounce this woman forgiven that day because he is going to personally win that forgiveness for her and for everyone else who will come to him like she did. Humble and an acknowledgement of their great need for what only he can give. See, the people think Jesus is a prophet. He is not. He is greater than all the prophets. He is who all the prophets have been pointing to. Who can forgive sins? Who can forgive debts? Well, the one who pays for them. And one day, not long from now, Jesus is going to make one last trip to Jerusalem. And this time he won't escape the schemes of his enemies. And they'll form a mob, and they'll go out by night to find him, led by one of his own disciples. And they will surround him and take him away as the rest of his friends all run away and abandon him to his fate. And the Messiah of God will be arrested and tried and sentenced to death by his own people on false charges based on false testimony given by false witnesses who were paid off by his enemies. And he'll be hauled before the high priests, and he'll be hauled before Herod, and then finally hauled before the Romans. And the Roman ruler of the day, a guy named Pilate, will even offer to let him off. But his people don't want him, and a huge mob of his own people will scream for his death. And Pilate will bow to the will of the Jewish people and to the leaders that have been stirring them all up and leading this whole plan to get rid of Jesus. And Pilate will have Jesus scourged and nailed to die on a cross by the side of the road outside of Jerusalem. And Jesus is going to let it all happen. And he does it all because he wants to. Jesus is hanging on the cross that day for a lot of reasons. But one of them is this. A couple of years before he finds himself on that cross, he was at a dinner party at Simon the Pharisee's house. And there was a woman there who welcomed him and honored him and wept over her sin at his feet. And he promised her that day, your sins will be forgiven. And as everyone else there that day wondered how it is that he could say that, he knew why he could say that. And he knew that one day he was going to go win that woman's forgiveness for her. He was going to go pay for it himself. He was going to pay for her forgiveness with his own life. Everyone at the dinner party asked, who is this who even forgives sins? He is the one who has won the right to forgive sins because he is the one who paid the debt of sin. He is the worthy one. He's the victorious one. He has done what no one else could do. He paid the price no one else could pay. Jesus picked up the weight of sin of this world, and he carried it to the cross and died under the weight of it in place of that sinful woman of the city and in the place of countless others like her through the ages, like you and like me. That's why he can pronounce her and anyone else he chooses forgiven. By his own great power and might, he has won that right, and he has been granted that authority. Because of what he has done, the forgiveness of God is his to give. And he will give it to anyone who will come to him and admit that they need it and ask him for it. Everyone has to choose. What are you going to do with Jesus? Who is he to you? To Simon, Jesus was a guest at his party. And to the woman, Jesus is everything she needs. That's really the choice everyone faces. It's one or the other. There's no middle ground when it comes to Jesus. He's not just a good teacher. He's not just a prophet. He's not even just a great prophet. He is the accomplisher of the salvation of God. He is the one who defeats the powers of darkness in heaven and on earth. He is the destroyer of sin who has won the keys to death and Hades. He is the one who has opened the way for man to return to the God who made them. He has done it all by sacrificing himself for us, by taking the sentence we deserve. Jesus lets himself be declared, in spite of his sinlessness, guilty in the court of man and be killed as a sinner, so that on the day when that sinful woman and you and I stand in the court of God, we, despite all our sin, can be declared innocent and live forever as a son. Jesus did all of this. And if you're one of the people who know this, then you already know there's really only one response when it comes to Jesus and what he has done for us. The one this woman demonstrates is to fall at his feet, weep over our sin, and anoint him and honor him with our lives for the great Savior that he is and what he's done for all of us.